Hello, and welcome to Worth Quoting, sponsored by the Women's Center at Florida Junior College. I'm Pat Broderick. Our guest is Jane Brody, science and health writer for the New York Times, columnist and author. Her most recent book, Jane Brody's Guide to Personal Health, is dedicated to the belief that people don't necessarily have to die of something, not if they live right. Welcome to our program.
Thank you, Pat.
80 million Americans, or 40% of this population, are overweight. And yet everywhere you look, you see people running, old and young alike. You see people at health spas. Is this helping?
It certainly helped me a great deal because I used to be a third bigger than I am now. And I lost 35 pounds and kept them off by stopping dieting, by making this a lifetime commitment, not to impress my friends at my college reunion, not to get into this particular dress for this wedding, but because it mattered to me to look well and feel well. And by taking my time and by making a commitment to daily exercise, because calories in have to equal calories out, or we get fat. And the average American who is overweight does not overeat. He or she under-exercises.
What about all these exercise books telling about cellulite or cellulite in your thighs? Is it just plain fat?
It is plain, unadulterated fat. There is no magic way to get rid of it other than plastic surgery suctioning. There is nothing that dissolves cellulite as opposed to dissolving any other kind of fat, because nothing dissolves fat other than eating fewer calories than you use up in the course of a day. And I found personally, I had that pockmarked looking fat on my body once upon a time, and by now making my muscle tone firm so that even an Italian would have trouble pinching me, I lost all of that. I lost all of that funny, ripply fat. I have less of it now at 41 than I did at 21.
What advice would you give to somebody who might have been sedentary for a number of years? How do you get into an exercise program safely?
First of all, you start slowly. Every change that you make in your living habits, perhaps short of stopping smoking, should be done gradually. And if you are over 40, or if you have any kind of a chronic health problem, you should be examined thoroughly by a physician before you start any vigorous exercise program. Second, pick something you like to do. And if you hate running, that's a stupid thing to start because you'll never stick with it. If you can't stand the chlorine in a pool, don't start swimming as your exercise. If you hate being outdoors, don't pick bicycling as your thing to do, but you might enjoy a stationary bike in your garage or in the basement or in your bedroom, and watch the morning news while you get your regular exercise.
How about questions out there? Go right ahead.
You obviously travel a lot, and I think a lot of Americans do. Do you run in foreign cities, and do you take your exercise routine with you?
I most certainly do. It is the most portable exercise routine in the world because all it requires is my shorts and my jogging shoes, my bathing suit and goggles. And I stay in hotels that have swimming pools and in which the pools are open early in the morning and or late in the evening so that I can swim before or after my day's work. I have never found a city that I couldn't jog in. I was in Africa this past summer, and in Africa, the only people who run are people who are being chased by something.
And that's something you know something about. As a mugger in New York City knows, Jane Brody is a very good runner. Isn't that right?
Yes, I chased my mugger, and I caught him, and I got my belongings back.
6 foot tall.
He was a whole foot taller than I am, and quite a bit younger. But it does pay to be in shape. Anyway, I ran in Africa every day. I saw the most beautiful sunrises and the most beautiful sunsets, and I saw animals that nobody I was traveling with ever saw because they were sleeping in.
I would say it's safe to say you lead a very high-stress life. You're always here and there. Sometimes you forget what city you're in, as a matter of fact. How did you really learn how to cope with stress?
Well, that again is a gradual learning process. You can't reform overnight. I used to be very tense and easily irritated, easily aggravated. Anything that went wrong I immediately took out on my own self by getting angry or upset or, distressed by it. And several things that I did. One is that I stopped trying to do more things than any human being had any right to expect of his or her body in the course of 24 hours. Secondly, I made sure that I have a healthy, stress-relieving tactic in my life, and that is exercise. Now, for some people, things like meditation or yoga or this so-called relaxation response or just sitting back and breathing deeply is a useful stress-relieving thing. I'm not a sedentary type person, so for me, physical movement was a crucial aspect to relieving unnecessary stress.
Well, you mentioned meditation. What about EST, primal screams, encounter groups, all of those sorts of things that seem to pop up, usually come from California?
They'll try anything in California. Most of these so-called alternative therapies are of limited value for the average person. First of all, they cost money. Secondly, they may raise your consciousness about certain aspects of yourself, but they don't necessarily give you the tools to cope with what you now know about. And you may need, if you really have a serious emotional problem, you may need professional help in addition. For some people, these things are useful. For others, they can be very dangerous. And it is hard to know in a program like EST, for instance, where you uncover people's defenses and you leave them there defenseless without any professional to help hold them together. All the glue has been removed and they can just land in a heap of pieces. That can be very devastating if there is no source of well-informed support to keep you functioning in the meantime.
Do we have another question out there?
Yes. How effective is walking as a daily exercise?
Walking is probably the best and most accessible activity for most people, even people in wheelchairs, because using the arm muscles to move your wheelchair is almost as good as using your leg muscles to move your entire body. The walking is relatively unstressful in terms of what it does to your joints. You do not have the same kind of pounding stress on your knees, for instance, and your hip joints as you would from jogging. It can be done almost anywhere and at almost any time. When I travel, one of the other things I do is I get street maps of the city I'm going to, and I plot out my appointments on the map, and I determine in advance what I can walk to. And if it's within a mile and a half, I will walk as long as, the plan is scheduled so that I can have enough time to do that. And I try to do that. I try to rearrange my schedule if necessary so I can do that walk. It's very stress relieving, incidentally. It helps you come down from one thing before you have to face the next.
You spent a lot of time in your book talking about medicine and doctors. I'd like to run a quote by you. "The time has come for doctors to stop playing God and for patients to stop worshiping their physicians." Now, that might be easier said than done.
It may be easier said than done, but boy, if we don't do it, we're paying the price for not having done it day in and day out, because the best medical care comes out of a joint effort between the patient and the physician. If the patient sits there and lets somebody do the job for him or her, then you are at the mercy of that person's wisdom, intelligence, knowledge, and you have no idea whether the doctor is simply guessing or really knows what's the matter with you and is prescribing a rational therapy. I have a couple of chapters in my book on how to talk to the doctor, the kinds of questions to ask about the drugs that are prescribed for you, what to ask when surgery is recommended so that you don't end up getting an unnecessary drug which is going to cause an adverse reaction for a condition that it couldn't possibly have helped in the first place, or you don't end up with an unnecessary operation that could maim you for life if not kill you outright.
What about finding a doctor? You said the most important thing is that don't wait till you're sick to get one, find one when you're healthy. Other than that, how do you know that you're getting a good doctor?
Well, does the doctor answer your questions in a way that you can understand? Do you feel comfortable asking the doctor questions? Do you feel as if you could trust this person with very private information about you? For example, if you have a drinking problem, but you're unable to tell this authority figure about it, you are essentially wiping out anything that that doctor can do to help you. So it's very, if you have a problem in your marriage, or if you're having a problem with your child who maybe got into drugs or flunked out of school or something of that sort, these are very important things about you that will affect your health and can affect your health in very serious ways. And you have to feel that you can have this kind of a conversation and have this kind of rapport with the physician. And that physician is not rushing you through. There isn't a room full of people waiting there, piled up, sitting there for an hour and a half until you finally get in there and you say, I don't want to take any of your time, I know you're very busy. You're paying that person for a service. If your television repairman came in and said, I'm sorry, I have 16 appointments today, I can only spend 5 minutes on your set, you would never even pay him, let alone call him again the next time it broke.
Doesn't wear little white jackets. I think that's the thing, probably. Do we have another question?
You've talked about reduction of stress and improved strength, I guess, or weight loss for exercising. I'd like to return to that just for a minute. Are there other benefits that come from regular exercise? And also, what is a realistic goal structure, if you will, when you exercise? I mean, most people, I think, would expect weight loss the first day or the second day, and if they don't see it, they want to stop. What do you recommend?
Okay, number one, the first thing you will notice when you start exercising is that you will feel more relaxed. You will actually feel better. It will enhance your self-image. You're doing something for your body that makes you feel good and less tense. But there are so many benefits of exercise. It could take the whole half hour just to summarize them, but I'll just tell you quickly. It helps your cardiovascular system, that's your heart and your blood vessels. It helps your respiratory system so that you can move more air, more oxygen in and out of your lungs more quickly and efficiently. It helps to lower your cholesterol level so that less fatty deposits accumulate in your blood vessels. It helps to keep your blood sugar on an even keel. And of course, as you mentioned, the stress relieving qualities of exercise probably are the most important. Now, what should you aim for? I would say aim for a half an hour a day, 20 minutes at the least, of breathing hard, of getting your heart rate up there so that you're panting a little bit. They're working up a little sweat. And you can do it walking, but you can't do it window shopping. You can't do it strolling. You have to walk briskly. You may have to carry something in order to make the amount of exercise count for the same thing. But as far as weight reduction is concerned, don't look for something overnight. But if you just climbed 2 flights of stairs a day for a year and didn't change your diet at all, you would lose 12 pounds.
But how do you know when you're truly in shape? Are there people who are just never going to be thin? Heredity must play some part.
In shape does not necessarily mean thin. I mean, we have an image of what the human body should look like in this country, which is dictated by a fashion model industry that bears no resemblance to biological reality. If you see what those fashion models eat, they don't eat food.
What do they eat?
They eat, some of them eat formulas, some of them eat carrots and celery and apples, and some of them don't eat. They eat once every other day. It's bizarre what those people will do, but they're earning $100 an hour, so they've got very strong motivation to be pencil thin. We don't have that motivation, nor should we, because it is really unhealthy.
Well, what image should we aspire to, if not the fashion model?
We should aspire to an image so that when we take our clothes off and look in the mirror, we have a body that we can say looks decent. There isn't globs of stuff hanging out all over the place. It doesn't mean that you have to be shaped like an hourglass if you're a female, or shaped like this if you're a male. But it does mean that you have nice muscle tone, that there isn't a tremendous amount of excess padding hanging around your body, which is stressful to your heart as well as to your head.
What about people who look at their parents and say, well, you know, they're both fat, there's no hope for me, I'm always going to be fat?
Well, there is hope for you, because genetics establishes only a predisposition. A predisposition needs an environment on which to act. Genes cannot be expressed in a vacuum. And if you do not give those bad genes, those unhealthy genes, a chance to express themselves, you can easily live out your more than 10 without ever developing whatever it is that you have inherited a genetic predisposition to. For example, if heart disease runs in your family, as it does in mine, if you don't smoke, if you eat a low-fat diet, if you make sure that you have normal blood pressure, if you exercise regularly and learn how to cope sensibly with stress, you probably live to 85 or 90 without any evidence of heart disease, because you haven't given those naughty genes a chance to do their thing.
Let's see if there's another question.
I'm asking a question about attitudes and quality of life. I've noticed you've exhibited yourself in smiling and having a sense of humor. You haven't mentioned laughter, and yet that's been one of the things even been mentioned in preventing cancer. Could you?
Good question.
Well, I think laughter is wonderful. I laugh a lot. In fact, if anything, I'm sort of embarrassed about my laugh because it tends to be loud and explosive. But whether there is any particular magic in laughter or it simply symbolizes an attitude toward life which is healthy, wholesome, and constructive. It says, I'm going to do something to help myself. I'm not sitting here and letting fate dictate what happens to me. Then sure, you're going to help things along. I mean, I think that a positive attitude toward life in general is very constructive and helpful in both preventing and treating illness. That's been shown over and over again. It will take a long time for so-called scientific medicine to accept all of this, because scientific medicine only believes something works if they can show it in a laboratory as having a biological mechanism. Well, there are biological mechanisms. There are changes in the immune response. There are changes in hormone levels. There are changes in blood chemistry, all of which promote health from a positive attitude.
You've also learned how to deal with anger.
I hope I've learned how to deal with anger. No, anger, I've been reading some interesting things about anger, and we've all been brought up to think that what we're supposed to do when we're angry is get it all out. You know, never mind what it does to the person you're getting it out on. And it really may turn out to be that only reinforces our anger. It doesn't calm us down at all to just get it all out under all circumstances, and that in many circumstances the best thing to do is to count to 10, calm down, give your opponent a chance to calm down so that you can apply reason to the situation, because lashing back in anger at someone or some situation that has angered you doesn't achieve anything.
That must be hard to deal with in New York, especially with all the pressures.
Well, but again, the things that I have done to reduce stress have helped me cope with all of those kinds of situations. And one of my favorite activities, incidentally, is to not let everything go until the last minute, because you're always going to be late and you're always going to be anxious. And if there's a traffic jam, or this light is broken, or the train breaks down, or somebody's walking slowly up the stairs, you will get very agitated if you haven't left enough time to go from place to place. And so I leave automatically 15 or 20 minutes extra time, more than I think it should ever take me, to go from one place to the other. And if I get there early, terrific. I have found time. I can go window shopping, I can stand and look at the stars, I can watch the people, I can fantasize, but I don't have to get agitated.
Sounds sensible. Do we have another question?
Yes, I'd like to know if you feel like there is such a thing as a stress-prone diet, and if so, what things would be on that diet, or what things would you exclude?
We all want to solve everything with nutrition, and nutrition doesn't solve everything. Certainly, if you are eating haphazardly, if you are eating a diet that is mostly sugary snacks, and that raise your blood sugar only to drop it down lower than you started out within an hour, then you feel rotten, so you eat something else sweet, and you back up again, and you go up and down like a little seesaw all day long, well, that's stress-inducing. It's also stress-inducing if you're not giving your body the nutrients it needs to function properly. You know, you wouldn't put kerosene in the gas tank of your automobile, and yet Americans put the nutritional equivalent of kerosene in their bodies all the time. So that is stressful. But you cannot counter the stresses of life by changing your diet to include these nutrients and exclude certain others. What you can do is improve your ability to cope with stress by eating properly and taking good care of yourself. You know, so-called clean living.
To what degree can somebody heal himself if he has a particular infection or problem?
Well, to the extent that we talked earlier about the value of a positive attitude on health. And there have been many studies that show that people who fight hard, who are determined to win, who are determined to beat their illness, and who are not depressed, not beaten down by life or by their condition, do better.
In addition, though, to behavior, home remedies, for instance, you mentioned the value of certain things like cranberry juice for treating urinary tract infections. What about treating oneself with home remedies?
Well, certain home remedies are very useful. For instance, you don't need to go to the drugstore or to your medicine chest and dose yourself with aspirin or acetaminophen or whatever it is every time you have a little fever, because fever is the body's way of fighting off infection. And you'd be much better off just going to bed, putting on some warm pajamas, putting on a cover and sweating it out. Because in that process of sweating it out, you will be fighting that infection much more effectively than if you brought the fever down.
So Aunt Sarah might have known what she was talking about.
Right,
then.
and you know, Grandma gave you hot milk and honey. That's a nice remedy for heating you up. One of my best, most effective cold preventives is if I wake up in the morning with sort of a scratchy throat and that drip behind your throat that presages an incipient cold, I go out and jog or bicycle and I get my body heat up, and by noon it's gone. I haven't had a cold in, I think, 7 or 8 years without vitamin C.
We have another question.
Do you see the current interest in health, nutrition, and exercise as just another trend, or do you think that we're learning something that will affect future lifestyles?
I think we have learned something that will affect future lifestyles. You know, when Jim Fixx started to write the complete book of running, people who knew him laughed and said by the time he finished the book, the running fad would be over and he would have no audience. Well, you know who had the last laugh. Over 800,000 hardcover copies later, Jim Fixx is a millionaire, and more people are running today than were 10 years ago when he first got this notion. It is self-reinforcing. When you start living healthfully, you realize how much better you feel in everything, how much more you accomplish. The time you give to exercise, you recoup, and then some, in increased efficiency, in the decreased need for sleep, in diminished time wasted on tension and anxiety and anger and stress and all those other things. It's a bargain by every count. And so it is self-reinforcing. And that's why I think it is here to stay.
Now and then someone does develop an actual physical ailment. We've been hearing an awful lot about so-called unnecessary surgery, triple bypasses, hysterectomies, tonsillectomies. To what degree do you think that they are being done unnecessarily?
Well, for different operations, different degrees. Approximately 30 to 40% of hysterectomies are not needed. They're done simply because the organ is there, lady, and you don't need it anymore, so let's take it out. Is that a reason to go under general anesthesia and have major surgery cutting open your abdomen? It makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no more sense to prophylactically remove your uterus than it would to remove breasts for no reason, because they're there and you don't need them and they may get sick someday. There are many things that you should do to avoid unnecessary surgery. One of them is to make sure that you know what the diagnosis is and what this operation might actually do to help you. A friend of mine who was going in for coronary bypass surgery The night before the operation, decided to ask the surgeon, how much longer can I expect to live after I have this operation? And the surgeon said, I don't know if you'll live a day longer. He says, then why am I having it? He says, because, you know, this is what your tests showed. He says, well, I don't want this. If this isn't buying me extra years of life, I don't want major surgery. He left the hospital that night, went on a proper diet, a regular exercise program, took a stress reduction class, and this is 7 years later, and that man looks better and feels better than he did the day he checked into that hospital and didn't have his operation.
May we have another question?
I've heard that people who live in environments where there are very few doctors are healthier than people who do, and I'm wondering if that is their attitude, or is it their own self-preservation, their own responsibility, or what do you attribute it to?
See, when you take responsibility for your health, you do a lot better, and you don't have a doctor at your beck and call at every minute. It's not that doctors make people sick. It's that it gives us a false assurance that when we can just let ourselves go, and when things go wrong, there's somebody to patch us up. Well, the truth is, most of what doctors do is simply a patch-up job. Very little of medicine. And the greatest medical authorities will tell you that only about 10% of medicine is curative. All the rest of it is just sort of a delaying tactic. And the condition that you've created in your body, or that has happened to you, stays. So that it really is important. And in China, incidentally, the people pay the doctor as long as they're healthy. As soon as they get sick, they don't have to pay anymore.
Well, if you spend all this time eating well, exercising well, and then you happen to be unfortunate enough to live in an unhealthy environment, what are you going to do?
Well,
Move
the
out to the
truth
country?
is, no, because the country has its own share of health hazards. It has pesticides, it has farm machines, it has various and highways that move very fast, and all kinds of other problems. The environment, certainly, I have a whole section on environmental health hazards, and there certainly are ones that are there, and there are things that you can do to minimize your exposure to certain of them. But the truth is that the greatest pollution comes from within. The air pollution is a meaningless concept when we look at people who smoke cigarettes. There is just no comparison. The amount of pollution people put into their own bodies in terms of what they eat, what they drink, the drugs they take, and what they smoke is so far greater than any poisons in our environment that, you know, it's almost meaningless to discuss it.
Jane Brody, I wish we had a lot more time. Do want to thank you for sharing this wisdom with us. I want to thank our studio audience and our viewers. Thank you for being with us.